Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to a new episode here on my YouTube channel. Hope you're doing well. Today we're jumping into a session that I played on ggpoker. I recorded all the hands throughout my session and we're gonna go through it starting in the beginning. So I would say without further ado guys, let's jump straight into it. And if you guys like this content, of course, make sure to subscribe to my channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out plomastermind.com if you want to learn more about pot limit Omaha. Okay, let's get into it, guys. This is a session on ggpoker as mentioned, rush and cash. This is PLO 50. On the right side, I defend in the big blind with ace 7-5-5 single suited to the ace. Pretty standard defend, I would say. But this is, of course, not a great board. I'm going to check and then check fold. Let me put it back on normal speed for now to start with. On the left side, this would be a hand I am going to open raise with if my opponent will fold. And probably even call if he decides to open raise himself. On the right side, king 6-5, single suited. Suited to the 6 only. I still believe this is strong enough to make the call, especially because I'm in position, which is great. Decent board for my range, not a great board for my hand. Against the bet, I unfortunately will have to fold because I simply miss the equity or blockers to do anything against the bet. Jack 10-10-6 in the big blind, triple suited. Could be a hand I defend against the small blind or against the button. And on the right side, beautiful hand, ace king 9-8 double suited. Definitely a hand that I want to play. Checking out the stats of my opponent. In case he would be extremely tight, I could consider flatting, but generally this is a hand to 3-bet with. I will also 3-bet against this player. VPIP 25. And on 5 deuce rainbow, my range is doing pretty good. I have all the aces, a good amount of king as well in there with the ace. So I will have the advantage here, leading to a situation where I can do a lot of betting. I would bet my entire range on this board for 1/3 and take it from there. And on the left side, in the meantime, I decide to open raise. Ace, queen, 10-5 double, pretty standard. I decide to c-bet the flop. Let's pause the video here for a second. On this flop, usually you could also consider checking back on the left because I have sort of a medium strong draw. I don't have any blocker to the board. And therefore checking back is definitely reasonable. However, I decide to bet on the left side because my opponent seems to be more on the wider end, 42 VPIP. And that will give me a larger range advantage on this dynamic board. So betting I think is fine. Also thinking about the fact that usually players who are overall too loose will not check raise enough on the flop. Miss out on check raise bluffs to put me in a difficult spot. So I think betting is okay there. Interesting turn, the king of hearts. Now on the king of hearts, I would say we will not usually bet very often. The out of position player will have a decent amount of king X to check call with. However, I think that against this player who is again more on the looser end, I would consider betting here because I think that he will check raise probably too often with his strong to medium strong king X hands for value. Some hands that he probably should check call with. And secondly, he will have more weak hands that he probably continues with on the flop, like dominated draws by myself, like for example low straight draws that will have a difficult time continuing on this flop. Now this is especially true because his range is very loose pre-flop. I wouldn't double barrel against everyone basically. On the right side, I decide to bet as mentioned, and we're going to take it down. Getting some compliments from Amy Hash. Thank you for that. Appreciate the kind words. And on the left side, let's see what's happening. In the meantime, a good hand on the right side as well. I'm going to open it up. I do think about it on the left side. Definitely not a mandatory barrel. But I will go for it this time and my opponent will fold. On the right side, we have a three-way situation. Ace king 6, decent board for my range, of course, but my hand without a heart or without a flush draw, backdoor flush draw, I don't think we want to bet. So I check, hope to see a turn. Unfortunately, the in position player pots. And we have a very straightforward fold there. And on the left side, ace, jack, 10, 6 triple. I'm not sure how much I love this call. Not sure how much I love this call. Could be a hand that is actually too loose. This hand is actually supposed to be a fold. If we look into this exact scenario, ace, jack, 10, 6 against a middle position open, we see that only the double suited variation is strong enough to either call or 3-bet. It is very close, but all the other variations are a fold, including the triple suited variation on the left side. We can see that we're losing actually 0.3 big blinds, which is a massive loss. So this is too wide by myself. There's almost no scenario to make up for such a big negative EV basically here. So I don't really love the call. Folding should have been the play. And on the right side, pretty good flop, flopping a rep and a flush draw without showdown value. I am going to raise it up here. My hand has a lot of equity against a big part of my opponent's betting range. If he folds, that's fine because we don't have any showdown value. He does make the call and we turn the nuts. Beautiful card, of course. This will be a card where I'm definitely barreling, of course. And on the left side, the money goes in. Aces, bada boom versus 8-8-5-5. Pretty standard. And king, king, 6-4. Single suited. This will be a hand to open raise with for sure. On the right side, barreling. Sizing wise, I'm trying to set up like a reasonable sizing on the river. So this way I have like a 2/3 to 3/4 pot bet size on the river left. On the left side, pretty interesting because my opponent is so short. I think because he is so short, he will 3-bet a lot of his ace x hands pre-flop and just tries to get the money in that way. And therefore, I decided to bet, thinking that I still have a large range advantage on this board, I would say. But B, also, like, he's not supposed to call really any hand at this SPR, I would say, with his stack size. So I think his range is too weak. And therefore, if I bet, I don't mind just picking up the pot straight away, maybe get some value from a queen even. And if I get check raised, I have a very easy fold, which is what happens here. Now, king, king, 6-4 could also be a standard check back here for sure. If you don't have an extremely large range advantage like kings on ace high boards, usually are hands to check back and keep the pot small. So we do get check raised, unfortunately. And on the right side, I'm going to open raise king 10, 7, 7. And I flop a gutter with 3 diamonds in my hand. Now, I would say my hand is a hand that I want to bet. Like, A, the board is decent for my range. I will have a betting range here for sure. Against a very wide range, I have an even larger advantage. And C, my hand has some equity, but I cannot check call. I simply don't have enough showdown value or playability in case I face a bet. So I'm just going to bet. I will often get a fold. But if I get called or raised, we'll have to deal with it. I get raised, and I'm gonna make the fold. Ace, queen, jack, 6. And against a 3-bet, a player 3-bets fairly quickly. I would say this is just a hand to fold. With the ace high suit, I would definitely make the call here, but unsuited, I think this is a fold. But let's take a look into PLO Trainer and see if that actually is correct. First of all, let's see if this hand is actually an open raise from the cutoff. So here we have PLO Trainer open. If I type in ace, queen, jack, 6, you can see that every ace, queen, jack, 6 combination is supposed to be an open raise in the cutoff. The best hands are shown on top. You can see the double suited variations there, having the highest EV, almost half a big blind. And then the EV quickly drops to the more weaker combinations. But also ace, queen, jack, 6 with the queen and the jack high suit single suited is an open. Now if I open and face a 3-bet from the small blind, let's take a look into this part of the game. Typing in ace, queen, jack, 6 again. What is it that we can see? We have the double suited variation being a call. We have the single suited variation with 2 suits exactly to the ace high suit being a call. And everything else is supposed to be a fold on the left side. Now, one thing that I always like to look into here is how costly would it be if I would decide to call? And the way to do that is to hide the EV difference. And we can see that if I would decide to call with the queen high or the jack high suit, This cost me, in theory, 1 big blind, which is a huge loss, a huge additional loss in addition to just folding. So if you would consider to make the call here, you have to have extremely high confidence in the fact that you're going to make up for an additional 1 big blind in order for you to make this call profitable. Now, I don't believe that's the case here, so I just make the fold, which is correct. And let's move on to the next hand, left side. I will open raise. The thing here is that we have a pretty short stack player actually on my left, which is kind of interesting, like 12, 17, so 35 big blinds basically he has in the big blind. But the thing is, like, this player seems to be pretty tight, like 18 VPIP, and that makes me believe that I do want to open raise. But let's again take a look into PLO Trainer and see if against a 30 or 40 big blind range in the big blind, this hand is actually supposed to be an open raise. At 30 big blinds, we are supposed to open raise only 27% of the time from the button. Now keep in mind that in this solution, both of the small blind and the big blind are short stacked, making us want to be even tighter. However, let's take a look. Ace 663, single suited. You can see on the left side that this hand is supposed to be a fold. Again, looking at the EV diff, only 0.06 big blinds. So the EV difference between folding and raising here is very minimal in theory. Now, once we add the fact that A, the small blind is deeper, giving us more reason to play more hands, and B, the big blind is fairly tight, I think this open raise is fine, and against a 3-bet, I should just fold in case it would happen. So let's see. Let's hope I actually fold. That's correct. I mean, we can actually check just to be sure. If we open raise... we don't have that hand, of course, right? We don't have this hand in our range. So we can't really decide on that. The only thing we can see is that the double suited variation is a very close call only, making me very confident that the single suited variation is actually a pretty clear fold against a 3-bet. Okay, ace jack 8-7 on the right side in the meantime, very standard open raise from middle position, and also ace queen jack jack on the left side is supposed to be a raise. Against the limp, I do just like to raise it up here. Usually limping range is very weak, wide. You will not get limp raised almost ever. So just start building a pot. Top 2 pair on the right side. I like to start with a bet, blocking the imposition stabbing range quite a bit. We have backup in case we get called, and we do take it down. Now on the left side, I think I usually want to check back here, even though my showdown value is quite marginal. And the reason is that my jack-high club blocker is just not that strong. I would also not value bet the jack-high flush draw, for example, there. So therefore, I sort of duplicate that principle and use this hand potentially to bluff on the later street in case needed. And on the left side, king, queen, 5-5 could be a defend against the button, the small blind even, but against the cutoff, this is just a fold, I would say. Especially because this player also is quite tight, it seems, 21 VPIP. You will see me opening these pop-ups all the time to learn more about my opponent's pre-flop ranges. How often do they 3-bet? How often do they open raise? To get a better, quick understanding of the dynamics of their tendencies, try to make the proper adjustments and also give them a color coding, because that will help me in future decisions. On the right side, in the small blind, we simply don't really want to call, especially against the tighter ranges. So just fold king, queen, 10-9 single, even though it's quite connected and decent. I like a fold there. On the right side, usually this will be a fold, but I think against a 46 VPIP player, I like a call, being in position. Also, the blinds are fairly tight, I think, on table 2 on the right side. So getting squeezed is not going to happen too often. So I just like to play there. Flop goes check, check, and on the turn, even though we pick up a flush draw, I think we just want to fold. We just have to fold here, which is what I end up doing. And on the left side, we flop the nuts, and it goes check, check, check on the flop. And on the turn, I decide to delay bet And we do take it down there. On the turn, like, you could think about checking again in the hope your opponent takes a stab. But I don't think that's going to happen too often on the 3, basically. On the left side, I will defend in the big blind. Queen, Jack, 10-10. Very nice connected hand. Single suited. However, against a 3-bet, we have to fold. You don't want to make the mistake of overcalling against a 3-bet to lose in high-raked games. You just want to be very, very tight, and also their ranges usually dominate the hands you want to call there with. Like, you could consider calling there. Those hands will usually be dominated by higher pairs, better suits. Even though the hand is very well connected, it just doesn't perform as great against a 3-betting range. That's a fold on the left, King, Jack, 10-5, I think it was. Yeah, and on the right side, beautiful hand. Let's open raise it and see what's going to happen. Jack, 10-8, 7 double. It cannot get much better, right? I mean, there are a few better hands, but this is definitely a good one. And on the left side, we also defend 10-9, 7-7. Interesting flop on both. I think on the right side, I like a bet with my 7 blocker. And on the left side, it is very, very close. My opponent bets on the larger end. He is short. We have a pair and a gutter. Like, I don't think we have a check raise bluffing range at this SPR on this board. And check calling is very tricky, very tricky. And the reason is because it's really hard to navigate on turns and rivers out of position here. If he barrels, there's only a few turns that are good for us. My opponent shows down ace, 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 10-9, so top set. And he checks the turn and checks the river. So let's think about his play. I like to flop bet. And then on the turn, I understand the check. Because he doesn't have a straight blocker, but also he has the 10 and the 9 blocking some of my hands that he heavily dominates. However, there are still a bunch of straight draws out there and flush draws now. And by checking, you all give them the free equity, basically. You give them the chance to see a river for free. And ace is 10-9 is not going to improve very often on the river. In fact, there are a ton of rivers that are very difficult to call down with. Like any 7, 8, King, Queen, Jack, or club is extremely difficult. I think betting on the turn in his shoes is not that bad. Yes, if he's up against 7, 8, it sucks. But anything else, really, he's doing really, really well. And he benefits from building a pond. So I wouldn't mind just betting there. As played on the river, checking there, I think it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable. There are now 3 straights out there. He doesn't have a straight blocker. And also very important, when you value bet the river, like with a strong hand, but not the nuts, basically, you want to get called by weaker mate hands, right? Like, and in this instant, like he is blocking a lot of the hands that I could consider calling down with, right? Like blocking the 10 and a 9 and having 2 aces basically makes it pretty difficult to get called by a weaker hand than a straight. I think I actually like how he plays there on the river by checking back. On the left side, I open raise and get a 3-bet. And this is quite interesting. We have a bottom pair and a wrap. Now on this board, I am holding a leading range. In other words, if I lead out, I would use a large sizing. I just pot. And my hand definitely could make sense to lead out with because I have equity. I have some sort of made hand, but like not a great hand. If I pot and my opponent folds an overpair, it's pretty good, right? Like I make a better hand fold. And if I check and my opponent checks back, like it's not great. It's not gonna be too great. Like I block some straight draws, which can stab. And on a ton of turns, even though I have a lot of additional equity, there are also all the overcards, for example, or blanks, where I don't improve. On the flop, I have a lot of equity. So I actually like leading out here. I actually like leading out. So let's see what's going to happen here. I'm definitely considering it. I think check raising is also fine here because players in position probably bet too often. But in this situation, like it doesn't matter because my opponent has top 2 pair and 2 backdoor flush draws, and the money will of course go in. Also, if I would have checked, we turn a straight. Pretty nice, and the river is the king. and I take down a very nice pot on the left side. Let's start off pre-flop here with the hand in question, which is 8-7-5-4 single suited. And we can see that my hand is an open raise on the right side here, but the EV of open raising is super minimal. So be aware of that, like don't overvalue a hand like this basically. So I open raise and my opponent decides to 3-bet with 10-9-9-6 double suited. Now I don't think this is a 3-bet. And the reason is because that hand simply doesn't push that much equity. Like if we go back to the hand 10-9-9-6, he doesn't push a lot of equity against the cutoff open raising range. Against a 4-bet, he's not in a great spot. He doesn't block aces or kings. So I think his hand is usually just gonna be a call. And let's take a look. 10-9-9-6 double is actually supposed to be a call. You can see the double suited variation in the middle. Now post-flop button against the cutoff, I'm using a new set of solutions that recently have been added to PLO Trainer. We're basically having every flop that is available now for button against cutoff in 3-bet pots. So for example, 10-6-4, you can see we have all the 5 different variations, the monotone ones, the 3 different suited ones with 1 flush draw, and then the rainbow variation, which is the flop that we are looking at. Now on this board, potting is the way to go. This is also a sizing that has been researched just to be sure that this is the preferred sizing on a board texture like this. And we can see that 14.8% of the time we are supposed to lead out for a full pot as the cutoff. Now, when we think about my hand, which is a bottom pair with a straight draw, we can do 2 things. Either I can just type in the hand at the bottom, or you can go to the strength buckets and try to find patterns to understand the bigger picture. And that's where I like to start. So I'm going to go to 1 pair, which is this section here, and I'm looking at a bottom pair at the bottom. 7.31% of the time I have bottom pair. And if I have bottom pair with a straight draw, you can see that bottom pair with a straight draw is actually supposed to lead out 47% of the time. So I'm going to click on this small little box on the right side and then filter for this hand class. And we can together understand what are the patterns here and what are the hands that we want to lead out with. Immediately, guys, like there's one thing that is shown right on the top left, for example, in the checking range, we can see 4, 5, 7, 8, which is the hand that I'm holding. So bottom pair with a rep. So if I type in bottom pair with a rep, you can see that bottom pair with a rep is always supposed to be checked here. And I think the reason is that this hand simply is too strong to lead out with for a full pot bet sizing. We don't benefit enough from denying equity. We have worse hands in our range that benefit more from it. And this hand is playing really well on a good amount of turns. So in case we check and my opponent checks back, this hand still plays really, really well. If we face a bet, of course, we have a hand that is strong enough to check raise with. So my hand very clearly is going to be a check. Now, one thing we can do is look at the EV difference again, and we can see that about 0.3 to 0.4 big blinds we are leaving on the table by checking. I think, as mentioned, keeping the pattern in mind, this hand is just too strong to lead out. Checking is the play. Now, what are the hands that we would consider to lead out with? Like if I remove the reps from my range, we can see that, for example, I had like King 8-7-4 on the top right. Or a hand like Queen 7-5-4. So bottom pair, open-ended straight draw, and 2 backdoor flush draws. A hand that benefits from making aces fold, for example. A hand that is a little bit weaker than the hand that I was holding in reality. Okay, and that's gonna be it also for this session, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, that you have some takeaways from it. Any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you did like the content. Subscribe to my channel. And if you want to learn more about the great game of Pot Limit Omaha, then head over to plomastermind.com, where you can also use the PLO Trainer, which is the software that I used throughout this session to analyze my game. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Over and out, and I will catch you in the next one.